Okay, we're going to try this again. Okay, this PowerPoint is just a very brief introduction to some of the concepts and terms that we will be looking at over the next 4 weeks. So again, this class is called Social Media Strategies. So what exactly does that mean? What we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at some different areas of social media. This chart right here can actually be found in your textbook. For this class, we're primarily going to be focusing on social commerce and social publishing, the idea how brands or businesses use social media. However, we couldn't really do that and really give social media justice if we didn't also take a look at social community sharing and socializing and conversing, talking back and forth, because that's really how businesses are being successful in using, in promoting their products online and customer relations and things like that. So we'll talk a little bit about who the audience for social media is, why they share, and those kinds of things, who's on social media. And then we pretty much then focus in on social commerce. For example, two of the biggest reasons to have social media is wanting to improve sales or increase volunteers or money, whatever the case may be, business goals. But then there's also customer service. So you see CRM there, that stands for Customer Relations Management. And a lot of social media is being used by brands for that exact purpose there. But in the end, we really want to focus on the business goals of the client and how we can use social media to better meet those goals. The social publishing side, will come in when we start talking about something called content management. Content management is a huge part of social media today. When it started out, social media marketing was just the wild, wild west. People were just tossing things out there and hoping they would work. Now people are realizing that their customers and their future customers are coming to them for information on a regular basis. Information about how to buy their product, but also just information how to live with their product. And we'll take a look at some example of those here today. But part of your social media campaign, and we'll have a separate video just on that, will be writing content for your client. Content in the sense it almost always is a blog post, but it also could be a video or an infographic or something like that. But it's got some depth to it. It's got some content that will be useful to the customer. We don't really talk about social entertainment in here as far as games and music and art and how that's delivered through social media. Although, honestly, good content that engages the customer often will include some sort of entertainment, some sort of game, some way to get them involved. And engagement we'll talk a lot more about too, and that's a prime part of this course, and that's the idea of how do we get the customer to interact with the business or with other customers that are part of that business. So engagement, how do we get the person to be involved with the content? That might be simple as a like or a share, or it could be as advanced as user-generated content, which we're also going to see an example of here in a minute. And that's the idea that the customers create the content themselves because they like the brand. Sometimes that user-generated content is asked for, where a company asks their customers to come up with, share photos or something like that. Or it could just be people who, are having fun and want to be a part of the brand. IKEA hacks is an example. So different things like that. So we'll look a little more of those when we get to the chapter or the unit on content management. But first, let's take a little look at the audience on social media. How do people use social media? It was a survey that was done in 2018, a consumer social media survey, and you can see that the top 6 social media channels that people use at least once a week, Facebook should be no surprise. It is still number 1 about people who check it regularly, 82%. May or may not be a surprise to you about YouTube being the second most. Now, keep in mind, let's talk about people using it. So Facebook and YouTube have good information as far as what the customer wants. Facebook is often about just getting in touch with people, finding out what's going on in their world as well as in the world in general. A lot of people get their news, if you will, from sources that are on Facebook. YouTube is actually the second largest search engine after Google because people are wanting to know how to do something. A lot of times they'll go to YouTube. We're a very visual society. We learn visually, and so YouTube shouldn't be too much of a surprise. Now, for the younger audience, like you guys, Instagram, Snapchat are pretty big there. If you'll notice, it's kind of interesting here that they talk about Pinterest being more used than Twitter. And I find that very interesting because most of us think of Twitter as being higher on that list. But I'm wondering if the negativity that exists in Twitter today might play some part in that. A little different, but close to that. This one says social media channels people use more in 2018. And you're like, wait a minute, I thought we were just talking about Facebook. No, this question is more on, okay, this is what everybody uses, but what are you using more this year than you've used in the past? And you can see the growth, therefore, of YouTube, Instagram, and Snapchat. But still, Facebook's still growing there, so that's a great answer too. But so YouTube and Facebook, not that your campaign, we're going to talk about that in a minute, not that it has to include those two, because keep in mind this is a survey of a very broad audience. So which medium you use will really depend on your audience. And we'll have another lecture on that as far as what is the best medium for the audience that you identify. And so we'll talk a little more about that down the road. So, but Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Snapchat, those are the biggies. So how do people access their social media? It shouldn't be a surprise to most of us that it's usually through a mobile app. What does that mean for you as a social media person or as a brand trying to get your information out there? Just the idea that, videos, infographics, anything like that, you just have to be aware of the fact that they're being seen on much smaller screens. But you can see that computer web browsers are still pretty high up there on the list. But mobile apps are growing. So interesting to see the smartwatch down there at 11%. I was just looking at Apple smartwatches over the weekend. So maybe that's a good sign that people are accessing it more that way. So who uses social media? You can see that on Facebook, it's primarily about even, but you should notice that females do tend to use social media more. This shouldn't be too much of a surprise if you remember from communication courses that women do tend to be much more relationship based, and social media is a lot about that. Men, however, are starting to recognize this as an information source, and so their growth is growing there. But how people use it and who's using it all should come into play when you think about how you're going to use these social media channels to reach the audience that you're going to identify for your client. Shouldn't be surprised that more men are on Twitter. Not surprised to see more women on Pinterest. The big, huge difference there is Reddit. Just something to be thinking about, and you could perhaps use in one of your discussions down the road, is the idea that Reddit and Twitter are often identified as the more volatile, more aggressive types of social media. Some not so much fun things going on in there, and they tend to be dominated by men, and in particular young men. So maybe I'll have a question down the road is, well, what does that mean? Do you see any significance in that, or is that just happens to be the way that it is? Excuse me. So also understanding why people share information in social media is important for when you begin to look at what kind of content you're going to develop for these people and you want them to share. Sharing is a type of engagement, and not only does it engage the reader in your content or the customer in your content, but by sharing, they're increasing the reach of that message as well. And that's another term you're probably going to see in your readings early on, is things like reach and frequency, how often people see a message and how many people see that message reach. So 84% of people share cause-related posts. There's some research out there about whether or not people actually believe in these causes or if it makes them look good by sharing cause-related posts. But either way, 84% share cause-related posts. The younger generation, like yourself, are very into, the cause movements and things like that. So it shouldn't be too surprising to you. So what does this mean for me as a marketer? We want to make sure that we, identify what are those popular causes and how can we, latch our wagon onto those. Without looking like we're taking advantage of it. So there's something called leveraging existing behavior, and it'll be somewhere in your readings. I don't know if it's this first week or not, but leveraging existing behaviors. And that's the idea of taking what's currently popular in social media, like memes were, or GIFs, or those kinds of things, and incorporating them in your work. And so finding a cause that's going to be right for your audience. Obviously, if you have an older rural audience, an anti-gun cause might not win you any people. In fact, it might lose you people. Whereas, a young urban kind of thing, maybe a conservation cause would be enjoyable to them. So anyway, you got to know who your audience is. That's called psychographics, is the idea of, what are they interested in? What are their interests? What are their goals? And those kinds of things. So anyway, and then 78% share content with personal connections. So creating communities for your brand is a good idea. 69% share to feel more involved. 68% share to define who they are, and then 49% share to inform or entertain. So not all of your content has to be, hard-hitting, life-changing kinds of material. Sometimes you can just lighten up, send them something entertaining, but it shouldn't be the main focus of your work. So here's just some terms that you'll probably run into early on in your in your readings. In particular, are owned, earned, and paid media. Owned media is media that you as a brand have control over. For example, Facebook and YouTube and things like that, even though you don't own them, you have those channels, you have control of those channels, you have control of what's on there, so those are owned media. But also even those things you actually own, like your your website and things like that. But those are owned media, channels that you control. I'm going to skip here to paid media. Paid media is, promoted posts, advertising on Facebook, Google Ads, those kinds of things, where you actually pay to have your message put higher on somebody's feed, or to actually exist on somebody's feed, or something like that. So that's paid media. Paid media is really actually starting to grow in social media more so than it used to be. And then that other one they have listed there, earned. And that's probably the most important. And earned media is the idea that someone has shared your post and increase the reach and frequency of when that post is being seen. That's earned media. You haven't paid for that. You haven't promoted that. You don't really even control that. Earned media is also user-generated content where the customer has actually created a story or video or something, or meme even that promotes your business, hopefully in a good way. And so it's earned is when the customer does something in social media that you don't really have control over. And that's a good thing. And why is that good? Why is earned better than paid or owned? Because the number one thing that gets people to buy a product these days are customer reviews. And so when someone else says this is a good product, we're much more likely to believe it than if the company tells us that. Whether the company tells us in a content on their own or in a paid ad, earned people making comments, that's what we're going to listen to. And so that's why earned media, especially earned positive media, is so important. We'll talk a little bit especially when we get to content, we're writing our blog post about organic search marketing, as well as just social SEO marketing, search engine optimization. Organic is when it sort of happens on its own. SEO is when you actually plan it out. So we'll talk a little bit about search marketing and how do we put words in and things like that, keywords in our writing, so that when someone's searching for our business, they can find it right away on the first page, if you will. Social media marketing is what this whole class is about. It's how to use social media to get your message out there. And it's done in a different way than advertising. Like, go back to that idea of earned media. And then finally, hopefully, I try to sneak this in as a section on email marketing. And this is really very, very targeted marketing, and that's why it's much more prevalent today than in the past. But however, you kind of need social media marketing first, because you need to identify those clients, and social media is a great way to kind of spread the word, if you will. And so once you get those out there, then we're going to talk about something called leads and lead conversion. And leads are when someone has responded to a post. Maybe you did in Facebook and they're saying, I'm interested in that. That's a very blatant lead. Maybe they filled out to get some more information. It's any way that there's that person that's gone that extra step, and then you're going to convert them, which means move them to actually buying or donating or whatever the case may be. So that's a conversion. And once you have that information from that person, maybe they've done it through social media, then you put that into email marketing. You have their contact information now. You can be very direct with them, even though it's going to lots of people. You're on your email list, but it's much more directed. And we're going to look at the different lifestyles of, the life stages of buying from people who are just kind of becoming aware of a product all the way to after they've bought the product. And email marketing plays a big part in that. It's just using email to target your message to specific people. So that's how the audience is, how people use social media, a little bit about starting to talk about the marketing side. So how do small businesses track social media success? What's important to them? Now, ours is going to be, our client for the summer is going to be a nonprofit. And I'm really excited to talk about it because you're kind of my guinea pigs, if you will. First time we're doing it. But it's a nonprofit child advocacy center in Tanzania. And so nonprofits and small businesses kind of have a little bit of difference. However, where small businesses might be going after sales, nonprofits are still going either after money or they're going after volunteers or something like that. So there's always something that they want out of this campaign. Now, here it says that the small businesses say, that engagement is one way that they track social media success. And I think that's because that's easy to measure. It's very easy to say, okay, I got 20 likes and 20 shares and 20 comments or whatever the case may be on that particular post. Yes, I can measure that. It's right there. The harder one, but the more important one, is leads and conversions. And that's the idea of I interacted with them on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube or wherever, but the lead, I got their lead, I got their information, I started sending them very direct email type things, and then conversion, I converted them into a sale. That's a little harder to measure because how do we know that conversion, that sale didn't happen because of something else, an ad or something like that? So it's very hard to say, they saw this Facebook post and so they bought this car. There are ways to do that, but it takes a lot of work. But those are the two top things you can see: engagement, leads, and conversions. And engagement's important because we have to get their attention and we have to make them feel like a part of our brand and have a much better success of them buying from us. Clicks on the website isn't important to them in tracking social media success. Although in my opinion, it depends on it. If that's where they're buying products, then it's pretty important that we get them to the website to buy. But someone just clicking there doesn't mean a lot. Okay. I find websites all the time and I just click around. And then audience growth, it's not so much growing their audience as finding the right audience. And so we'll talk a little more about that too. So the class is built around this idea of building a small campaign. We're just doing one objective, one topic, very small kind of thing. It's not like you're going to do social media for a whole year for this organization. We are focused on actually two different kind of goals that we've been given. One is either to raise more money, get new donors for this organization, or to reactivate and get more money from existing donors. So we have a couple of goals there. Normally in the class in the past, I've let people pick their own business and create their own goals and their own objectives. This is a little more fun in the sense of we have someone who actually needs something from us. And so that's why we're going to already have the goals in place for this. So you can see that this is sort of the framework of this. So we're going to start out with our goal is to, like I said, either increase donations or get new donors. So objectives, and we're going to go much more in depth in these either, but objectives would be, measurable ones, like we want to increase donations by 10% over a 3-month period. Okay. And then we have to find out, where are these people at? The people that we want to give money to this organization. Where are they, or are we going to find them? Okay. We'll go more in depth to that. We're going to get online. We're going to listen to conversations. What are people talking about? How can we use what people are talking about to benefit? We're going to conceptualize our campaign. What are our strategies? What are our tactics? Those kinds of things. What are we going to do? And how are we going to do it to get people to send in money? And then we need to get their attention. And that's where we do our content. So we're going to come up with content that's really speaking to our particular audience. So it goes well with our strategy, which is why would people want to give money to this organization? Okay. And so you'll think about why you give money. And we'll talk a little more about that too down the road. Again, I'm getting a little too in depth, but this is supposed to be just sort of an introduction kind of thing. So anyway, get them to like you, which has a lot to do with strategy about why people would do what they do. Get them to interact. So the best way to get someone to make a comment on your post is to ask a question. For example, research has also shown that you get people to interact by saying, "Please click here" or "Please share." Believe it or not, that really really works. And then eventually we want to go to conversion, which is we convince them to go online and buy, or in this case, go online and actually donate that information or that money. So, okay, so that's sort of the outline of our campaign there. This objective strategy tactic, we're going to go real much more in depth at that, but I specifically want you to look at goal, objective, strategy, and tactic. Because those are the 4 areas, and I'll have a lecture just on those in week 2, so that we get a little more in depth on those. Okay, content marketing I talked about. This is the idea of creating content to further your campaign, or just actually it needs to be on a regular basis so people have a reason to keep coming back to your organization. You want to become an expert in a certain area. Okay, now ours is going to be content just for one specific campaign. But this is content that needs to be built on a regular basis throughout the year so people come back constantly and stay active with your organization as opposed to just a one-time deal. If you're a car dealership and somebody buys a car and they only buy a car like every 10 years or something, how do you get them to come back? What kind of content can you create that they stay active and stay involved with your brand? Okay. So we're going to talk a little more about that, like upselling, where you say, okay, they bought the car. Now, we're going to sell them service. We're going to sell them oil changes. We're going to, provide content that shows them the importance of having an oil change, the importance of keeping their car tuned up and serviced. So the kind of things like that. But it's content that has to be developed on a regular basis. Here's just a couple of examples, and I'll give you more of these as we go on through the class. These are a couple that were picked as top content providers by a couple of organizations. One is Patagonia. I hope you're familiar with Patagonia. It's an outdoor wear. So they do a lot of things with outdoors. And so you can see here a couple of articles. Had a whole page here called The Cleanest Line. They are very much known, Patagonia is very much known for cause related. So, that's who their audience is. They're very environmental focused audience, young people for the most part. And so those people tend to be very cause related. So a lot of their content is there. However, in doing that, they also then promote their products, or they at least have images of their products in doing this. So for example, they may have some story about saving the glaciers, but they're also going to maybe talk about and show people wearing their outfits that are, weren't cold weather outfits around the glaciers, that kind of stuff. So anyway, Patagonia, checked out, it's their community, Patagonia, check out the Patagonia blog and you'll find that. And then Land Rover, just another example of different stories. Here, the adventure of 2 Canadian explorers in a 1957 Land Rover Series 1. Building a community, building this popularity. Land Rover is one of those, it's sort of a cult, and I mean it in a good way. Jeep is the same way. I own a Jeep, and people buy these types of vehicles a lot of times based on emotion as opposed to logic. And so we want to play with that idea and keep that going. Okay, and then also, I've mentioned user-generated content before. It's the idea of creating, where the customer creates the content. And the nice thing about that is it creates huge engagement. It's harder because I don't have time. It's your business to create content, not mine as a customer, but it gets them involved. And so it's important. And this is from Sephora. I hope I'm saying that right. I know it's a beauty organization, but I don't buy a lot of makeup. But you can see that you create a profile in their community. You have groups you can get involved with, conversations and galleries, and share your images and stuff like that. That's absolutely what their audience needs. It's young women, and women are very much about relationships and social community and stuff like that. And plus, it's user generated, so it's users, not just them promoting their products. The best, highest engagement there is the user-generated content. And then finally, in that last week, we're going to talk about how to monitor our campaign, what metrics are. These are things we measure so that we know whether or not our campaign was successful. And the reason we do that is because the boss wants to see our ROI, our return on investment. He wants to see that we were worth the money in social media campaigning to, to get return on investment. So for example, let's say that you build a campaign and you do this for this group in Tanzania and they get a 10% increase in donations. We need to show that that was because of the content and the actions that we took, not because something else going on. And why is that important? It's to keep our jobs down the road. If, especially if we work for a business or something like that, we need to justify what it is that we do, for one thing. And two, we need to see where we're making mistakes so we don't invest time and energy and money and resources into an area that's not working. And so that's why we want to see what worked and what didn't. So we'll talk a little more about that at the end. So I'm sorry this got a little long, but I just wanted to get those concepts. So take a look over week 1. If you have any questions, let me know. Tomorrow I'll be uploading the video about the client project for the semester. So let me know if you have any questions. Bye.